People's Television now brings you PTV News.
Good evening, I'm Issa Rodriguez with Chiqui Roa for PTV News, the primetime newscast of People's Television. In tonight's headlines, administrative charges may be added to criminal raps filed against detained Lumban, Laguna Mayor Reynato Macalalag. President Ramos orders a full-blown probe of the spate of fires that have hit a number of government and privately owned buildings.
The prosecution in the Vizconde Massacre case questions the authenticity of U.S. certified travel documents of murder suspect Hubert Webb. And overseas, a powerful explosion creates panic in London and raises fear of another Irish Republican Army attack.
Detained Lumban, Laguna Mayor Reynato Macalalag faces yet additional charges. The president directed DILG Secretary Robert Barbers to study the possibility of filing administrative charges against Macalalag. The embattled town mayor is now facing at least 2 criminal charges for his alleged involvement in 2 murder cases in Lumban. The president also directed his chief legal counsel Renato Cayetano and Justice Secretary Teofisto Gingona to provide full support to Barbers in determining the additional charges.
I also have directed the Secretary of Justice and the Chief Legal Counsel here and also the Executive Secretary to provide total support to this effort on the part of our crime-fighting task force so that the truth of the matter will be brought out and as may be warranted by the results of the investigation that meaning the preliminary investigation, that the case be prosecuted in court.
The president's order followed the arrest last night of Mayor Macalalag by a team of law enforcers led personally by Secretary Barbers. Macalalag has been linked to the killing of Lumban Barangay Tanod Alberto Quiatson and human rights lawyer Clarence Agarao. More from Butch Marco.
Kami rito, wala kaming pinipili, kay mayor ka, kay gobernador ka, kay ano ka pa man. As long as there is an order from the court, we implement the order.
Showing that he means business, Interior and Local Government Secretary Robert Barbers personally served the warrant of arrest on Lumban Mayor Reynato Macalalag for the murder of former Barangay Chief Alberto Quiatson last November 1995. Macalalag also is the principal suspect in the murder of Quiatson's lawyer Clarence Agarao last April 30. Agarao is Macalalag's nephew. The beleaguered mayor denies any participation in the 2 murders.
Hindi po totoo yun. Marami pong nakapaligid doon. It was a birthday party. At maraming tao doon. Kaya yun po ay kasinungalingan, kabulaanan. Hindi po totoo yun. Many persons will testify to the truth.
Barbers took a hands-on stance regarding these murder cases in Lumban last week, as the municipal police made no effort to go after the suspects despite the Justice Department order. His first act was to relieve the police chief, Leo Vigildo Manaig. After Manaig and Macalalag, Barbers immediately ordered the manhunt for the suspected triggerman in the murders, identified as Sani Calcada, a first cousin of Macalalag.
As a matter of fact, personalities had already been identified.
How many, sir?
Nung una ako nagpunta, 3, ngayon ata naging 5 na. And they already have in their custody a very reliable witness.
Lumban has a history of bloody political feuds dating back to the 70s. There are confirmed reports that these feuds have already claimed more than 100 lives. Barbers vows to put an end to this bloodshed.
The Philippine National Police Laguna Command is already pursuing the identities and arrest of some personalities that has already been unearthed or identified by some witnesses.
Butch Marco for PTV News.
Also today, Secretary Barbers presented to newsmen a policeman and 2 others nabbed for possession of prohibited drugs. The suspects were identified as Police Officer 3 Rolando Corcuera of the Northern Police District, Roberto Simbulan and Rodrigo Lazo. Seized from them were some 50 grams of shabu and an undocumented .22 caliber handgun. The arrests were made by elements of the DILG's Public Assistance and Response Against Crime or PARAC.
8 persons suspected of coddling convicted murderer Rolito Go are ordered arrested. The 8 were found to have communicated with a fugitive through Go's cell phone during his 2.5 years in hiding. They were identified as Eduardo Cunyeng, Frederick Yu, Gregorio Biares, Raymond Lim, Shirley Tamondong, Bon Rivera, Beth Angeles, and a certain Machang. The PNP-CIC has already filed a case against the 8 with the Justice Department. Meanwhile, Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Rene Cayetano said Go's close relatives are not exempt from criminal liability for harboring and coddling him. The president orders a full-blown probe of the spate of fires that have hit a number of government and privately owned buildings. The president's directive was contained in a memorandum to DILG Secretary Barbers. The chief executive ordered a closer look into the possibility of arson, the involvement of syndicates, and conspiracies behind these fires. He cited the cases of the Ozone Disco tragedy and the fires that damaged the Philpost buildings in Manila last week and the Department of Tourism building last night. The DOT fire broke out at 10:45 p.m., gutting the building's 5th floor occupied by the Philippine Tourism Authority, or PTA. It damaged the offices of the PTA Budget and Accounting Division. Executive Secretary Ruben Torres said Malacanang is alarmed over the fire given its incidence just a week after the controversial Philpost blaze.
I'm asking them to expand their coverage to include the intentional kind of fire, such as arson, those that may have been the result of a conspiracy, those that were done by a syndicate or an organized crime group. And also I've asked them to look into national security aspects.
Meanwhile, PTA General Manager Ed Joaquin brushed aside suggestions that the DOT building fire had anything to do with a suspicious Philpost blaze. Joaquin said they will cooperate fully with probers to determine the real cause of the fire.
That's an unfair speculation, and I can state for a fact that the Secretary of Tourism, whether it be Eduardo Pilapil or Mina Gabor, has no direct day-to-day involvement with the Philippine Tourism Authority. We get our mandate from the Secretary, we get policy decisions from the Secretary, and strategy decisions from the Secretary. And of course, we report our performance and we're rated based on our performance. Pero kung sasabihin mong susunugin yung accounting department or yung budget department namin para mawala yung mga transaksyon ni Secretary Pilapil, wala po yan. Dahil hindi naman po kami ang involved sa day-to-day affairs ng Secretary of Tourism. Kami lang po ang implementing arm. So, I mean, thank God it was the PTA's unit that was burned. I mean, can you imagine what the speculations would be if it was the Department of Tourism's accounting and budget department that was burned?
Chemical experts are set to submit their findings tomorrow on the cause of the mysterious fire that gutted the main post office building last Sunday. NBI Director Santiago Toledo has also invited for questioning Philpost security personnel and other workers to shed light on the blaze. He said all of Philpost's records for 1994 remained intact, while documents for 1995 can be easily reconstructed.
For the investigator to proceed, we must, there are questions that we have to ask the security. Because one basic question is, who was the duty security officer? What he observed before, during, and after the time. Those are all important questions to be asked. But that might be already touched on the after fire report.
President Ramos assails the underlying political and personal agenda as the basis of LDP's decision to sever its existing coalition with the Lakas NUCD. The president issued a statement as the LDP gears for its national convention this month to ratify its formal breakup with the administration party. In his weekly news conference, the president said the administration can handle and will survive the end of the coalition. He also warns that such an action would jeopardize the existing broad bipartisan support for the country's economic and social reforms.
We will try our best to maintain the cooperation that had existed before. But there are some that are apparently bent on removing it or destroying it. But then the government, the administration, is not helpless against these moves by people who do not see unity, solidarity, and teamwork as a national society as our first priority. I think they have their own personal agendas to follow.
Senator Sergio Osmena III urged the Lakas party to open itself to outside talents who are of potential presidential caliber. He said earlier statements he made regarding the perceived weakness of Speaker Jose de Venecia as a winnable candidate were based on surveys conducted by various entities. He said the Speaker should not be offended, nor should they take it personally, since he is merely echoing what several party mates are too timid to voice out. Regarding reports that De Venecia-Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo tandem is on the drawing boards, Osmena said the party should study whether Arroyo would be able to pull votes to favor the Speaker. Meanwhile, De Venecia said he has no intentions of seeking the presidency in 1998. NPC Solon Jerry Espina, for his part, spoke of the possibility of De Venecia being drafted as a coalition bet if talks between Lakas and NPC on such tie-up succeeds.
I'm not doing this to De Venecia. I'm doing this for the Filipino people, for the party. So, wag naman siya magalit sa akin sapagkat sinasabi ko lang po yung pakiramdam ng maraming miyembro ng partido na natatakot magsalita. I'm just quoting what the surveys have shown so far. It is possible that Mr. De Venecia might come up in the surveys.
I am not a candidate, and I am here to help President Ramos, to help our country, turn this country around, and reduce poverty, if not abolish it eventually.
The president condemns the series of violence that marred the nationwide Sangguniang Kabataang elections. The president blamed traditional politicians who meddled in the youth polls as the cause of the violence. The chief executive, however, said his administration will continue to support initiatives that will ensure the youth's participation in government affairs. He is hopeful that poll violence would be minimized with a strict implementation of electoral reforms.
The resumption of the Vizconde case trial and more significant news developments here at home follow shortly. Stay tuned. Still on PTV News, the prosecution in the Vizconde Massacre case is not giving up on its belief that Hubert Webb had a direct hand in the gruesome murders. At today's resumption of the trial of the case, the prosecution questioned the authenticity of Webb's travel documents, which had been certified by the U.S. government. Rocky Ignacio covered today's proceedings, and she filed this report.
The defense and prosecution panel spent one whole day of the Vizconde trial in a stormy debate over the authenticity of Hubert Webb's travel documents. The bone of contention, the authenticated report from the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service dated August 31, 1995. That document disproved an earlier report that Hubert's U.S. travel documents are missing and showed instead that Hubert was abroad the time of the Vizconde Massacre. The lawyers of the Vizcondes questioned its validity and demanded that the original copy of the same document dated August 31st be presented in court. State Prosecutor Jovencito Zunio also questioned the validity of a supporting letter from U.S. immigration official Deborah Farmer dated October 13.
It says there, the printout is herein attached, the printout of the Hubert Webb's arrival and departure. But the date of the printout is October 26. So it shows that while at the time the certification was prepared, there was yet no printout. So it's something irregular, anomalous.
The lawyers of Hubert Webb insist the Department of Foreign Affairs had been furnished with copies of Hubert's travel papers October last year. Attorney Vitaliano Aguirre explains they requested additional copies from U.S. authorities, which they received also last October. This explains why copies of all important documents show different dates.
There's nothing irregular about this. What is material is the date of the note verbal. The date ng note verbal is October 30, 1995, while the date of the computer printout was 4 days earlier, October 26, 1995. Kaya there's nothing irregular about this. Besides, Secretary Shason has sent us a copy of that computer printout as early as August 1995.
Meantime, Foreign Affairs Secretary Domingo Siason says he is not in a position to attest to the veracity of the computer printout of Hubert's travel papers.
The note verbal does not contain a certificate, a computer printout. It is the certification that contains a computer printout. And the certification by the consul refers to two documents. So I think there is more opportunity to scrutinize the documents.
But sir, if the
from both sides.
printout came after the date of the certification, what if this?
Well, I cannot pass judgment on that because I have been ruled incompetent to say.
For PTV News, this is Rocky Ignacio reporting.
16-year-old Ana Reynante, who fell prey to a white slavery ring in Hong Kong, arrived safely tonight. The still visibly shaken lass was met at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport by Mrs. Gina de Venecia, wife of House Speaker Jose de Venecia, and DSWD social workers. Reynante hails from Bocaue, Bulacan, and was recruited to work as a domestic helper at the Crown Colony last April 30, but ended in the hands of a white slavery syndicate. She identified her recruiter as a Chinese known only as attorney and who resides at 6th Avenue in Caloocan City. She identified her escort to Hong Kong as a certain Mrs. Dasalia.
Sabi niya, yung trabaho ko daw katulong, hindi naman po katulong.
Sana this is a lesson now for the young girls na mga ganitong edad na sana wag silang maniwala sa mga taong kumukuha sila na in the guise of giving them a better life, pala magigilang silang prostitutes dun sa pupuntahan nilang country. So, meron naman tayong marami namang ginagawa ang gobyerno natin para mabigyan ng trabaho ang mga ganitong mga kabataan, mga Pilipina. Sana dito na lang sila sa bansa natin, wag na sila lumabas.
Speaker Jose de Venecia commends lower house members, including those in the minority, for their swift action on the consolidated Anti-Pedophilia Bill. The measure, which declares pedophilia as a heinous crime, was approved on second reading today. As such, violators would be meted out specific penalties ranging from arresto mayor to death, depending on the gravity of the sexual offense with minors or below 15 years old.
This will put all foreigners coming in, taking advantage of our children on notice that we will no longer tolerate this, that we will put them behind bars. We do not do this. Tourists going to Europe or America do not do this. We hope that tourists coming from around the world who come here should not also abuse our children.
Commission on Higher Education Chairman Angel Alcala says tuition fee increases in all private colleges and universities are inevitable for this school year. Alcala said 70% of the amount of the increase will be for salaries of teachers, 20% to school improvements, and 10% to scholarships. A new law provides for the deregulation of tuition fees imposed by private schools. Meanwhile, Congressman Carlos Padilla is urging the government to provide subsidies to private schools to prevent skyrocketing tuition fees. The Department of Agriculture says vegetable stocks in the markets are safe and fit for human consumption. Agriculture Secretary Salvador Escudero III gave the assurance in the wake of a published report that vegetable stocks in the markets have high toxicity levels from pesticides used in their cultivation. He said the report was an old one. The Senate Finance Committee will endorse a proposed 5-year, 100 billion peso modernization program for the Department of Health. Committee Chair Ernesto Maceda said 20 billion pesos will be allocated per year to upgrade medical equipment and extend improved health services nationwide. He also noted the need to expand the heart surgery program, which up to now can only be availed of at the Philippine Heart Center in Quezon City. He also batted for more burns units in the regional health centers.
The Metro Manila Waterworks and Sewerage System will adopt a concessionaire approach to fast-track the privatization of the water agency. MWSS Chief Angel Lazaro explains that this will enable MWSS to retain all its fixed assets while operations and management will be transferred after public bidding to 2 private concessionaires. Lazaro said 60% of the concessionaires should be owned by Filipinos, 20% by international investors, and the remaining 10% by MWSS employees. He said total investment needed to improve the water services is about $6.1 billion. Senator Miriam Santiago vows to introduce legislations in order to improve the dental health services in the rural areas. Addressing the 88th Annual Convention of Philippine Dental Association, Santiago also cites the need to overhaul the already obsolete Philippine Dental Act of 1965. She also noted the lack of dentists in the countryside. PTA immediate past President Diampo Hahara Lim said dental practitioners are more involved in the curative rather than preventive aspect in the delivery of oral dental care.
The Senate is finally moving to its new offices at the GSIS complex along Roxas Blvd beginning November this year. Senator Ramon Magsaysay Jr. said a total of 150 million pesos has been set aside for the renovation and rental of the new Senate offices until the end of 1996. Its plenary sessions and committee hearings will be held at the new site also by November. The Senate Secretariat and other offices, including the media office, will transfer there by January 1997. Audit Commission Chairman Celso Gangan vows to improve the audit services in order to promote efficiency in government operations. Chairman Gangan spoke during ceremonies marking the 97th anniversary celebration of the Audit Commission. The week-long celebration was ushered in by a Thanksgiving Mass held at the COA compound in Quezon City. The celebrations featured the unveiling of an art exhibit at the COA memorabilia.
Our ASEAN Roundup focuses on Indonesian President Suharto's visit to Madagascar and Thailand's car manufacturing industry. Here's Chiqui.
Indonesia's President Suharto begins to recover from the memory of his wife's death by making a state visit to the scenic island state of Madagascar. Suharto spoke to Madagascar's President Alberto Zafy to promote stronger bilateral relations between their countries, particularly in trade and diplomacy. This is Suharto's first official mission overseas after the death of his wife just last month. Thailand is emerging as Asia's car manufacturing hub. Reports say Thailand's 15 car manufacturing plants are doing well, and the industry looks ready to double its current output by year 2000. Just last year, Thai car firms sold more than 500,000 units, and the industry's assets reached an estimated $12 billion. The boom in Thailand's car industry stems from government's decision to liberalize the trade and reduce import tariffs. And Singapore learns its lessons from the Barings Bank collapse. Finance Minister Richard Hu says the city-state has taken steps to regulate the financial system to prevent a similar problem. Hu stressed this during the meeting of governors of the Southeast Asian central banks. He said one of the measures adopted by the Singaporean government is a crisis management system that helped it cope with the effects of Barings' tragedy.
Up next, the latest bomb attack in London and a ceasefire in civil war-torn Liberia. We'll be back shortly. In news overseas, a powerful explosion creates panic in London and raises fear of another Irish Republican Army attack. But British police have yet to find evidence that the explosion at a construction site in the British capital was done by terrorists. The initial blast caused the explosion of several gas canisters inside a building, creating a monstrous blaze that threatened nearby houses. No one was hurt in the incident, but it sent dozens of people fleeing in panic. A series of bomb attacks launched by the Irish Republican Army have made London residents very nervous these past months. A new ceasefire takes effect in Liberia, but the situation there is still far from normal. Reports say the truce has been violated this early. The ethnic Kran forces clashed with armed followers of warlord Charles Taylor in a bridge in Monrovia. Isolated encounters are reportedly taking place in some other parts of the city. Earlier, leaders of Liberia's paramilitary groups agreed to stop fighting and hold peace talks in Ghana. The U.S. reacts strongly against the UN report over Israel's attack that killed over 100 people in Lebanon. The State Department hits UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali for drawing unjustified conclusions as regards the issue. Boutros Ghali ruled earlier that Israel's defense of tactical error was unlikely, though still possible. U.S. officials felt that statement serves only to prolong the controversy instead of solving it.
British and Russian officials seek a compromise on the fate of British diplomats linked to a spy scandal. A source from the Russian Federal Security Service told Reuters News that both parties will still negotiate how many British diplomats will be deported and when. The Russian Foreign Ministry is keeping the negotiations a secret to prevent a diplomatic conflict with Great Britain. But it wants to declare 9 British diplomats as persona non grata for their alleged involvement in the espionage. A storm in Bangladesh leaves a trail of destruction on land and at sea. The howler, with a force of up to 70 kilometers per hour, flattened houses and uprooted trees in the worst hit town of Cox's Bazar. But the bigger loss is the reported tragedy at sea when 10 trawlers capsized during the storm. Reports said 140 fishermen are still missing because of the accident. A powerful explosion hit a soap factory in Mexico City. Over 30 people are injured in the blast, while police are still trying to confirm the reported deaths of at least 2 victims. The blast caused severe damage to the factory and sent debris flying into neighboring buildings. Investigators suspect a gas leak may have caused the accident. Rescue workers and sniffing dogs are sent to the site to help locate the victims. Japan's top sprinter loses his chance to be in the Olympics. The athlete Yoshitaka Ito is slapped a suspension by the International Amateur Athletic Federation for using a banned steroid. The suspension will keep him out of competition for 4 years. The drug, which enhances muscle strength, was traced in his system when Ito was tested last March. Ito is Japan's main man in the century dash, whose personal best record stands at 10.22 seconds in that distance.
The Olympic News Update was presented by Birch Tree and Milo.
And here's what to expect tomorrow weather-wise here at home and in our ASEAN neighbors. Coming up is Dial M. Please stay tuned for that. And that's PTV News, May 8, 1996. With Chiqui Roa and for Eric Espina, I'm Issa Rodriguez, wishing you all a good evening and God bless Philippines.